Welcome everyone to this month's SEL IRC seminar. We're very blessed to have today with us Mr. Alan Amling, who's Vice President of Corporate Strategy at UPS. And we're fortunate that this is his last formal presentation with UPS as he moves forward to finishing his PhD program and joining academia following that. UPS is a wonderful partner of Georgia Tech. We appreciate their support. Alan's been in logistics and with UPS in particular for 27 years, so he's gone through a lot of changes. UPS is constantly morphing. It wasn't probably too long ago that they weren't into warehousing and all the modes and 3D printing that they are, but now they're pretty across the spectrum, and I think Alan's going to talk with us some about that and the changing dynamics today. So please join me as we first watch a video, and then Alan will come up at the end of the video.
Remember when the future challenged your imagination? The wireless communicators, the electric cars, the flying machines. Eventually, we stopped imagining the future. We built it. But sometimes the future is hard to see, even when it's right in front of us. It's not easy to question today's business models, but those that don't are getting left behind. In the digital age, companies rise and fall as new platforms become the norm. The logistics industry is no different. Digital disruption is coming. Imagine a world where you can ship products, not by plane, truck, or boat, but digitally. Imagine a supply chain with no physical inventory, but instead a virtual warehouse in the cloud. This is not science fiction, but what we call the fourth modality of logistics.
If we had one of these in engineering, we could make all the spare parts we need.
New tools of digital design and additive manufacturing make this possible.
That video seemed like it ended a little abruptly, didn't it? Probably made a lot of people uncomfortable. It typically does when I show it. People want the answer. And the video actually is cut off. I cut it off on purpose. There is a second half to it that does give you an answer. Talks about what UPS is doing with a company that we invested in called Fast Radius to build out a global network of 3D printing facilities. But actually the future is really unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty. And that uncomfortable feeling is how a lot of businesses feel right now. Now, many of you in this audience are in school. You might be getting to graduate. You might be getting ready to graduate. And the audience that I typically talk to are not students. They're people that have been in industry, that are in industrial companies that are being impacted by the digital economy. And this is something that I've experienced, as Tim was saying earlier. I've been pursuing my PhD for the last 4 years, getting close to the end, but for those of you that I feel for you. I had to go back in the classroom. I had to take comprehensive exams again. I had to feel that pit in my stomach just like you guys do. And I remember just how that felt. And why did I do that? Why did I go back to school? And I was 52, 51 at the time. Why did I do that? And it's because the context the business is operating in today is changing. It's changing rapidly. And the fact that it's not that change is new. Change is not new. What is different, and what I'm going to talk about today, is the pace of change and how that's impacting companies, and specifically how it's impacting supply chain companies. At UPS, when I first came to our corporate office in Atlanta, we had a strategy group in marketing, And I was responsible for competitive analysis, and I looked, and our lives were a lot easier then. We had FedEx was a competitor, key competitor, DHL, the post office, and at that time, you guys don't even know this company. There was a company called Airborne Express, and they were kind of the big companies. Today, we have literally hundreds of competitors, which I'll show you. The environment is completely different. It's changing rapidly. New rules. And that'll happen when pigs fly. So I use this a lot when I start out my presentations, and it's an analogy for the impossible is becoming possible. And if you do not realize that, you're going to be left behind. And so I'm going to show you over the course of this presentation how that is impacting companies. Because it used to be, and when I say used to be, 7-10 years ago, if your top management team and your board of directors, if they were very smart and they knew the industry really well, they could make the proper trade-offs to propel the company forward. Over the last 10 years, not just with, the explosion of the commercial internet, but all of the thinking and connecting technologies that we'll talk more about, have literally changed the rules of the game, have eliminated boundaries that have been in place for decades. And if you don't understand that technology layer, you can't make the best decisions for your company. You're going to make suboptimal decisions. So today, being smart and knowing your industry are necessary but insufficient conditions for success. You have to understand that underlying technology layer. Now, if I was you sitting in those seats, I'd be really happy to hear that information. Because what that says is that companies like UPS and other industrial companies need people like you. And they have to learn from you. And they have to leverage your experience. The things that you're learning here at Georgia Tech is so valuable. Because without it, we can't change fast enough. So this is it. This is interesting. So Sun Microsystems, they were like the Google of the 80s. So you guys might not know them, but they were a big deal at one point. This is actually a picture of the old Sun Microsystems. It's actually the back of Sun Microsystems sign. This is the front. So I know you recognize this, right? So Facebook bought their building. They didn't even bother to cover up Sun Microsystems on the back. They just flipped the sign around, put the thumbs up, and they're good to go. Fundamentally different company. Facebook is a born digital company. They run on data. So I know from my kids that Facebook is no longer cool, but the fact is there's like 2.3 billion regular users of Facebook. And they are so sophisticated collecting all that information and getting better and better and better. They are a born digital company. And they had some really highly publicized big multi-billion-dollar acquisitions a few years ago. Have you noticed they haven't made a lot of billion-dollar acquisitions recently? You know why? It all comes back down to data. So do any of you have the application, it's called Onava, O-N-A-V-A? Millions of people have downloaded it. It's an app that basically does a diagnostic of your smartphone. And how many people here, when you download an app like that, one of the things you have to do is you have to check the terms and conditions box, right? How many people read those terms and conditions from front to back before they click the box? Right. I don't either. In those terms and conditions, the information on your smartphone is routed through the Onava servers. And they have a right to use that information. You gave them that right. So now, Facebook has an early, they basically take all of that information in, and they're able to snap up companies earlier in the cycle. They are a born digital company. And the reason I bring that up is that it's just fundamentally different when a company that is born digital and a company, an industrial company like UPS or any other company, we could be looking at the same problem or the same opportunity and see two completely different ways to get there. And typically, the digital way is going to get there quicker. And that's one of the things we're seeing, and I'm going to point that out a little later. So here's the other thing. So 130,000, what's that? So let me go back. 130,000. So, and I'm not quite sure what it was last year, but this was in 2017. Amazon added 130,000 new employees in just 2017. Just 2017. Let me put that in perspective for you. The average Fortune 500 company has about 42 to 45,000 people. So over 2.5 Fortune 500 companies they created in 1 year. 1 year. The other point I want to make here is just around mindset and mindset shift. And Amazon's a born digital company. When same-day delivery came to Atlanta a few years ago, you know, I was skeptical because it was like, okay, I've worked at UPS for a long time. I know how this stuff works, right? I know how much stuff costs. And I know that they can't deliver these low-priced items and make money. It's not possible. They can't do it. Because I know, right? I'm a veteran of the logistics industry, and I know. So one morning, I love Crest Cinnamon toothpaste. You can't find it everywhere. You find it on Amazon, and I ran out. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to order a tube of Crest Cinnamon toothpaste, and I'm going to have it delivered same day by Amazon. And I was laughing inside, saying, they can't do it. They won't do it. I ordered it. Got home, 6:15. 6:30, no Amazon. I'm like feeling pretty good about myself. I know better than they know. 6:45. A guy drives up into my driveway in a Lincoln Town Car, gets out, walks up, delivers my tube of Cinnamon Crest toothpaste. And I went, oh, things are changing. And what I missed was, and this is the danger, is I was thinking that they were going to do it the way we do it. They're not. They're looking at it completely differently than the way I look at it. Because at UPS, if I invest $1 here, I've got to make $1 there. Amazon doesn't. Amazon can invest $1 here and make that dollar in several different places. They also have a completely different cost structure in the way that they deliver that package. And they have, they have multiple revenue streams. They're just not making money off that delivery. They can lose money on the delivery and make money in other places. It's a different business model. And so that's what this technology is allowing. It's not just about the technology, it's the new business models that they enable. And so you've got this, this huge power shift that's been going on for years where, all of us as consumers have access to the greatest source of power since the dawn of time, information. I mean, so, I don't know, whether you're apartment hunting or you're going to buy a new car or, any kind of major purchase, even a small purchase, who doesn't do all sorts of research on the internet? And I remember, there was a day, I'm dating myself, I'm an old guy, where I would go in, and I remember when I bought my first car, it was an Acura Integra, used. And so I didn't know, how much it costs, and I tried to do I used to use my best negotiating skill, and then the guy I was talking to said, well, I don't know if I can do that price, but let me go back to my manager and see if we can do a deal for you. And he came back and said, oh yeah, well, we can't do that, but we can do this. That's the best we can do. It's rock bottom. That doesn't happen anymore, right? Because I know how much money you have into it. The internet tells me, right? We have the power. More and more, it's about on demand as well, and it's that, as consumers, we want what we want when we want it at the lowest possible cost. That's what we want. And businesses that aren't set up to deliver that are in trouble. But let me tell you, that's hard. That is hard for a business, for many businesses to live up to. And the other big trend is around globalization, and even though there's a lot of political talk about that globalization is not as strong as it used to be, we're not seeing that at UPS. I mean, we're continuing to grow globally. If you look at kind of where our revenue and profit is growing the most, it's actually outside the US. And then e-commerce is driving a lot of this as well. So in e-commerce, it's kind of an interesting problem that we have, or opportunity that we have. So, it used to be that, just to give you an idea of the challenges that we face, first of all, e-commerce is very, very good to us, right? It's great. Because instead of you going to a store and bringing something home in your car, you're having it delivered to your home, and that's what we do. So that's good. But it's been challenging to our operations. So, at one point it was, we would deliver 10 cases of shoes to, let's say, a Foot Locker, and there were 10 pairs of shoes in each case. So 100 pairs of shoes. Now that's 100 separate deliveries. Same amount of commerce, an exponential increase in deliveries. And then who buys one pair of shoes or one shirt, right? Typically you're going to order several and see what fits, and then you'll send the rest back. So it's creating all of this commerce, which is really good. But it creates challenges that people like you are going to have to help companies figure out. So e-commerce and globalization and urbanization. So you think about increasingly crowded cities, and the challenge of increasing e-commerce shipments. So today, e-commerce is about 13% of total retail. You probably think it's more, but it's actually about 13%. It's more in China. It's about 20% in China of total retail. And so you've got more and more of these shipments going into increasingly crowded cities. And you think about, Manhattan would be like the 6th largest city in China or something like that. So you have a real challenge of how do you get all those goods into these increasingly crowded cities? And it's going to take new business models, because the way we're doing it today is not sustainable. Today, UPS prepays parking fines in Manhattan. And if you've ever been to Manhattan, you probably saw this, can see this in Atlanta, but in big urban centers, we're double parked all over the place. And you often see a ticket on our package cars. There's no other way to deliver the way we deliver, right? So we pay a lot of parking fines. But at some point, it's not about paying the parking fines. We just won't be able to do that. And this other challenge is even more daunting. So, you talk about Amazon, you can talk about Netflix, you can talk about Apple, you can talk about Google. What industry are they in? Is it the whole idea of industry boundaries and discrete industries is like, it's going away. They're in multiple industries. They're leveraging what they're doing in one area to go to another. And so that's like, what you see on the bottom there is like all of their business units. They're all separate businesses. And then I talked a little bit earlier about our industry, the supply chain industry, and how it used to be simple. I like this, but it's like you could probably triple this in terms of the number of competitors that are out there. And a lot of them are digital competitors, right? They're taking portions of the logistics supply chain and providing real value. Real value. Now, the challenge is, and this is the one thing that, so right now I've been running our corporate venture capital group, so I've been working with startups, principally in the logistics industry for a while. And you remember I said that there's 3 components for success? You need to be really smart, you need to know your industry, and you need to have an understanding of that new technology layer. There are a lot of startups that I've talked to that understand that technology layer really well, but and are really smart, but don't understand the industry. They fail too. You just don't hear about it. It's all 3 components. And so some of these are going to make it and are doing really well. It's like Flexport just got a bunch of money. Fourkite's got a lot of money as well. We're invested in some. I'm going to show a little later about some of these logistics companies that UPS is invested in. But you think about the landscape from a few core, what we would call core competitors, to now it's like, if you think that you're going to defend your market space playing whack-a-mole, that's not going to work. So this is an interesting slide, and when I click it, it's going to start to move fast, so I'm going to prep it for you a little bit. So these are the top 15 global brands in 2000. Okay, we're 2019. So less than 20 years ago. You guys recognize all these brands. We have our hometown Coca-Cola at the top. Disney's on there, Intel, GE, Nokia. So I'll bet you're going to guess that that's going to fall off, right? And you'll be right, along with Marlboro. Marlboro's fallen off too. But what I want you to notice is that as these brands change, as this animation goes, you're going to see Google come on about 2008 and kind of go up the rankings pretty high. But like Amazon, you're not going to see Amazon until 2015. And what you're going to see is like about 2012, you're going to start seeing the brands change really quick. There's change that's happening since 2000, but see what happens. There we go. Oh, the race is on. Marlboro's dropping. McDonald's, hey, you're hanging in there. Good. GE, IBM, Stalwarts, Coke, love it. Nokia, oh gosh, where's Nokia going? Oh, they're coming back up. McDonald's is staying there, nice. Not a lot of change at the top though. I feel really comfortable. Yeah, Toyota's moving up a little bit. Citibank, ooh gosh. Oh, there's Google, okay. So Google's new, they're going up fast, but not a lot of change. And then along comes, oh, look at Apple. What, wow, what's happening? This is crazy. I'm getting nervous now. I'm uncomfortable. There's a lot of change. Oh my gosh, so 2015, where's Coke going? Oh my gosh, our hometown brand? It's in Amazon. Oh my God, where did they come from? I didn't even see them. And here we are, 2018. Bam. Do you see what I'm telling you? We're not just making this stuff up. It's happening right now. Things are changing very quickly. These industrial companies, these companies that weren't born digital, are in trouble if they do not change. Look at that. Look at who's at the top. It can't be any clearer. So are these industrial companies going to go away? Yeah, some of them are. Absolutely. At an increasing rate over the next 10 years. But not all of them. Some of them are going to be hiring people like you to change that company from the inside, to provide that digital layer, that understanding of the digital layer that allows them to adapt in this new environment. And it's so important because, you know, I think about UPS, it's like we're the tightest ship in the shipping business, and if we're about efficiency, and we're really, really good at that. And when you talk about innovation, I differentiate sustainable innovation from disruptive innovation. So sustainable innovation is you're innovating, but you're selling to the same customers, you're selling the same type of product, same kind of revenue streams. You're just doing more of it, you're doing better, you're making more money on each sale. Versus disruptive innovation, which is you're attacking a new market in a new way. That's really hard for industrial companies, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that's so disruptive. So here's, I'm having trouble with that. So here's the challenge that you guys probably understand better than most audiences that I talk to, is that the growth that we're seeing now is exponential. It follows a logarithmic, an exponential curve, not an incremental curve. So you saw in that slide what just happened to Amazon, right? They didn't even come on the scene until 2015. And by the way, their brand growth in 2018, they're going to be number 2 or 3 this year. But they didn't even come on the scene until 2015. They had been in business for 21 years. They were established in 1994. And they grew like this. Exponential. And that's really important for companies to understand. So I love this lily pond example where, you know, the lily pond is going to grow exponentially over the course of 36 months. So first month there's 1, second month there's 2, then 4, and so on. And then when the pond is halfway full, most people think that, oh, you must be, right around 18 months or 20 months or 21 months. No. When it's halfway full, you're at month 35 out of 36 because it doubles in month 36. That is so hard for many people my age to grasp. Because you look at Amazon, you say, where do they come from? Where these new, digital entries? How'd they get there so fast? And it's because when you're right here, you think you have time, but you don't. And this was all the talk in the World Economic Forum. Takes place every year in Davos in January. These were the big topics at the World Economic Forum. Everything about AI, which I'm sure you guys are, very up to speed on. But you think about the ability of a computer to reason, to make decisions, and all the different offshoots of AI was a big topic. Geopolitics and trade, obviously, we know about the challenges with China, but it goes beyond that, the intellectual property protection. Climate change, sustainability was obviously a big topic. Probably a bigger topic was not on the environmental side, but on the social side. And it was around the wealth gap that's happening. And when I look at the challenges we face, this wealth gap is probably the greatest challenge of our time that's happening right now, because the technology, with all the beauty and all the great things that it brings, it's concentrating more and more power in fewer and fewer people. That's one of the things they talked about. And then the resulting reskilling and retraining gap as things change. And so one of the things that you see is that while they're talking about 4 different things, they're really talking about one. They're talking about technology, because technology is what's driving all of this. And if you look at all of the different components of technology, it's not about one component. It's about how these things are working together. One of the things about machine learning, I was having a discussion earlier. You think about, so one of the challenges UPS has, when we get in our supply chain business, when we, during the holidays, or let's say it's for shoes, so shoes have 2 big seasons, and you get most of the business during those seasons. And so, we bring on a lot of extra people in our package operations. We bring in a lot of extra people during the Christmas holidays, and we train them up. But we train them individually. We train them incrementally. And then you see what's happening with robotics and machine learning. And I had an experience. I was, and this shows you how quickly things have changed. I have a kid from, I call him a kid, young man from China that he was actually part of the ASIC program that Georgia Tech promotes. And so we hire people from different parts of the world at UPS. And then they work in our corporate office for 18 months, and then they go back to their home countries and work for us there. So in 2012, this gentleman came to work for me when I was running marketing for supply chain. Worked for 18 months, went back to China, did a great job for us in China, but then he met up with some buddies. And that knew AI and were getting into robotics, and they said, well, let's start a company around robotics, focus on the logistics industry and leveraging AI. And so this was about the 2015, 2016 timeframe. And they came to UPS, and so they're one of the companies. We put a small investment into them, but and they're running some pilots at UPS. But scale forward, now 2019, they've got multiple pilots running. They have some of the biggest investors in AI are invested. I don't know, you might know the name Kai-Fu Lee, one of the biggest names in AI is an investor. Alibaba, Jack Ma. So this is funny. So Jack Ma wanted to buy 20% of his company. He said, no, I don't want to take that much money from you. You can only have 10%. That's what he told Jack. My intern from 2012 told Jack Ma this, this past year. And now, actually, one of the top executives at UPS, 500,000 people, is actually his chief commercial officer. And he has this robotics company. So that's from 2012 to 2019. That's everything that changed. And one of the things that's so interesting, getting back to machine learning and the challenge of incrementalism, is that these robots are really, it's really about the AI. The seeing technology, the robotic arm technology is interchangeable. But that AI is so important, and the AI, it learns how to pick. You know, for UPS, it's all, you know, they're doing smalls for us right now. That's what they're testing. And it's all different types of, you know, different sizes and shapes that it has to learn. But the thing is, once that robotic arm, once the AI learns how to pick, that information goes up in the cloud. Now every robotic arm knows how to do that, equally as well. It's a dramatic change. Now, we're still in the early days of this, no doubt. But you can start to play this forward. Internet of Things. You know, you can't go into Home Depot now without getting like bombarded with smart home stuff, right? Those ubiquitous brown package cars that from UPS that you see in your neighborhood, they all have over 200 sensors in them. And we're doing predictive maintenance on all those vehicles. You guys know about big data, 3D printing, I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. 5G, so I know I'm talking to a different audience and you guys get 5G, but you know, most people I talk to, they think 4G to 5G, big deal. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is it's 100 to 250 times faster than 4G. That is a huge deal. And when you talk about autonomous vehicles cruising down the road at 70, 80 miles an hour, latency is a big deal. If you're doing a remote surgery from halfway around the world using a robotic arm, latency is a big deal. 5G is a big deal. Blockchain. So blockchain is something that we're really interested in at UPS. One of the experts in blockchain is right here, Bob Gillen. And I'll have to say it's been overhyped, right? Like a lot of new technologies, they go through this hype curve. But there's a lot of great application and more that are happening, especially when you think about brokerage and applications like that, where UPS basically became the largest broker by buying up all these small brokerage operations. But a lot of times, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. If everyone's working off the same immutable ledger, you can fix that problem. That's blockchain. That's a real value. autonomous everything and drones. So I'll tell you what. You can tell it's my last week at UPS because I never put the F word on any of my slides. I just don't do it as a rule. But they announced a couple weeks ago that they've got this autonomous drone, and they're working with Dean Kamen, the Segway guy. And it's pretty cool. And their model is they're going to run it from the FedEx office stores. Right, so if you think about where those are, they're on campuses, typically very dense areas. That does make some sense. It's really interesting, kind of how all of this, autonomous, and whether it's flying drones or delivery drones, or think about mobile lockers, autonomous mobile lockers. There's like all sorts of ideas that are coming into the space to help provide a digital age solution to some of the intractable logistics problems. And all of you can be a part of that. And so what's the payoff? I'm going to give you a couple examples from UPS. The first one up there is a gas pedal on a Husqvarna tractor. So Husqvarna makes like lawn and garden equipment and a lot of other stuff, but they're a customer of ours and our partner Fast Radius. And what is unique about this part here is that it will never be stored in inventory. It's in virtual inventory. It won't be produced until someone needs it. Do you realize how that rocks the supply chain? Supply chains are built for things that are manufactured in mass. And they, in big bulk, whether it's air or ocean, and then they go to distribution centers where they're stored, waiting for demand. There's a lot of transportation that happens. There's a lot of storage that happens. Because there's not a good match between supply and demand. You've got a future where there's going to be a closer match between supply and demand. It's not going to happen overnight. There are still tons of hurdles to overcome. But you can read the tea leaves, and it's already starting to happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The other one that I really like is, in the middle is our letterboxes. So for years, we have drivers that at a certain time, if you go to a letterbox, it says, last pickup, 5:30 or 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. And the driver goes by and stops at every one of these, and we have tens of thousands of them around the country. A lot of times there's nothing in them. And they stop anyway. And then one of our IT engineers said, why do we do that? Why don't we just put a sensor in the bottom of our letterbox that sends a signal to the driver, tells them whether anything's in it or not? Yes, that's a good idea. It's those kind of, why, the question that I have is, we have a lot of we have 500,000 dedicated people that know logistics. Why did it take this one guy in New Jersey to come up with this idea after we've been doing this for years and years and years? It's mindset. It is mindset. And then the other thing that we've done a pretty good job of, I think, is we take in over 240 data elements on every one of those packages that we deliver. And when we're picking up, we have all this data, but you guys know, data is worthless unless you can convert it into information that's valuable. And so we have a program that's been in place for a while now called Orion. And I will tell you there's a guy, I'll call him Jack, that's his real first name, that was the champion of Orion. And it was really tough because he was championing this big data solution kind of in the early days before we had, you know, all this storage capacity and data processing and algorithms. He had to essentially create it, and he had a lot of fits and starts, but he stuck with it, and now it saves us millions of dollars a year. It takes thousands of metric tons of carbon out of the atmosphere every year. This one guy sticking with it, and he'll never say that. If you ever went up to Jack and said you were the guy, he would say no, it's a team effort and everything. But the reality is, you need to have someone that is willing to rub up against the corporate infrastructure, that's willing to say, no, this is really going to happen. And he had people that really care about him that said, hey, Jack, you're starting to lose some credibility. I care about you. I want you to continue to move up. You know, this thing, it's just not working. He stuck with it. And it's a big problem. Number of ways to deliver 120 stops. There's a lot of ways to deliver 120 stops. And what came out of this is that you may have heard, you know, UPS no left-hand turns, right? Left-hand turns are a waste. You have to stop and idle at a stoplight. It takes time. You're burning fuel. You're putting carbon in the air. So we do all right-hand turns. And this algorithm, this whole thing that he helped start, it increases our efficiency. So all this change and all this disruption that's going on, it's not inevitable that these industrial companies are disrupted. It's not. And you know, when I started my kind of the academic side of my journey, this was like my passion. It's like, so why is it that, you know, Clayton Christensen from Harvard wrote The Innovator's Dilemma back in the 90s, and we've seen these examples of companies that have got disrupted. We've seen these patterns that are developing, that are only accelerating, but companies aren't changing fast enough. Why is that? That was the question that I had. And so I went through my PhD program. I've been, over the last 2 years, year and a half, I've been interviewing leaders from industry, from digital companies, and I've been interviewing colonels and generals in our military. So why the military? Because I want to understand, how is it that they make high stakes decisions under conditions of uncertainty? Because that's at the heart of all this. It is not about risk. It's not about risk, because companies have systems and measures in place to deal with risk. Companies understand and can mitigate risk. Uncertainty is what's left over after you've quantified all the risk. And that's what makes companies really uncomfortable. And military leaders have to deal with that all the time. So this change is hard. So there's an academic term around this, but essentially it's hard for companies to understand, imagine a different way of making money, and the term is, it's called dominant logic. And the dominant logic is, UPS, we make money by delivering packages. at Blockbuster, they rent videos. So what is the, if you ask someone in a company kind of what makes the cash register ring, they kind of center around that. And changing that is really hard. And this is an example. So this is a company that was absolutely crushing it. So you look at that green line is the profit, yellow line is revenue. Revenue is going up. They're enjoying like 50% profit margins. I mean, you're working in a business that's making 50% profit margins, you're feeling damn good. And so they're cranking from 1975 to 1992. And then this happened. So, God, why didn't they see it? They invented the digital camera. They have the patent on the digital camera. They invented it in 1975. So, actually, 2.5 CEOs looked absolutely brilliant saying, we're a film company. That's how we make money, in film. And we're going to stick to our knitting. Yeah, this digital is good. It's not like they didn't do things in digital. They did, but it was a hobby. The real business, where we make money, is in film. And then digital started to take over. And you think about, oh gosh, they should have seen it. And this is the one thing that just rubs me so wrong. It's not like the Kodak management, it's not like they didn't know their industry. And it's not like they weren't really smart. They were. They were on top of their game. What they didn't understand was that underlying technology layer. So you think about it, if you've worked yourself up from 75 to 92, you're probably a chemical engineer, or you have a chemical background, right? Because that's a film. You're talking about your chemical. And then it switches to digital. Your chemical background doesn't help you in digital. So am I going to embrace that? I don't know. I can't. Everything that I've learned to get to this big position with the big money, it's not as relevant if I switch gears to digital. It's tough. It's really, really tough. You see the same thing happening right now in the auto industry with autonomous, right? Just because I understand the internal combustion engine in those vehicles doesn't mean I understand autonomous, core technology being batteries. And if you've ever been in a Tesla, you know it feels like you're riding in a computer. It's different, right? It's completely different. And that's really, really challenging for established companies. And one of the big challenges, things that I think about quite a bit at UPS is, I don't want us to be the most efficient company at processes that are no longer relevant. Let me give you an example. Blockbuster. Again, oh gosh, they were asleep at the wheel. Well, they probably had some really smart people that were saying, you know what we're going to do? We need to optimize our operations. We're going to get better inventory control around our DVDs, and we're going to kind of optimize the flow of customers through our facility. And we're going to get better and better and better at that. And they did. Who cares? Right? They optimized a process that became irrelevant. So one of the folks that I interviewed was a telecom executive, and he had worked for some of the kind of dinosaur telecom companies and some of the newer telecom companies. And I love this quote. He said, you can actually be too smart and sleepwalk your way to becoming irrelevant over time. and staying relevant. That is the absolute key. And so basically what he's saying is that companies get in trouble because they know their industry so well, and they're making the decisions that made them successful in the past. But when the landscape changes and you're applying old decision rules and old business models to a new context, that's when you get in trouble. Here's the other one that I like. This is something that was used at the World Economic Forum, and it was about, they talk about AI, but substitute any of the technologies that I talked about. And so if you look at this chart, you'd look at it and say, okay, I got to invest in AI. I want to be that blue line, right? So that's easy to say. Here's the hard part. And this is the part that a lot of people don't see. Don't pay attention to that. Pay attention to years 2017 through 2021. So the people that are making these decisions to invest in the future, look at that cash flow line versus the followers or laggards. For 4 years, boy, it's really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. And your lifetime in an executive role, 4 years is a long time. Not producing the results that are expected in 4 years, that's tough. That's really tough. It takes courage. It absolutely does. This is not easy. And to think that you're going to go into a company and make all these changes, it's going to be easy, you need to understand this dynamic. And you need to be able to tell the narrative about the future. So this is another way I like to think about it is the industrial economy versus the digital economy, where if you're really good at chess, you can plan out your moves in advance. But that's not the digital economy. The digital economy is more like mixed martial arts, where you could plan for a right hook, and then you're going to get a left foot to the face. You have to be able to adapt quickly. And it's a fundamentally different capability to be able to adapt quickly versus plan in advance. And Clayton Christensen, who I mentioned earlier, is on my dissertation committee, and he's a brilliant guy, man of few words. But I was talking to him about where I was going with my dissertation and what I wanted to do, and he stopped me. He said, Alan, you need to understand that God didn't create data. Okay, and this was over the phone, so I couldn't see his face. I'm like, I don't know what to make of that. And so I paused, and then he went on. He said, it would be a real benefit if you could help companies understand that the most important data, the most important information for their future is the information that has not been created yet. When you think about that, I can't tell you in my career how much time I spent and hundreds of people, and it's not just UPS, it's all like industrial companies doing these detailed 5-10-year plans. And it's not that you shouldn't plan, you should plan. But you need to understand that these things are going to change, because after you roll out the first initiative in the first year, you're going to set off a bunch of reactions in the marketplace that you have absolutely no control over. None. And it's going to change what you do next. And your ability to accept that and change quickly is going to be a real key determinant of success in the future. And so I read thousands of papers, which I know you guys have to read a lot of papers. It's not, as you know, it's not Sunday reading to get through an academic journal article. And so one of the things that I kind of summarized kind of three big themes in a lot of the articles that I read around this topic. And one is around cognitive barriers. And so there's a lot of academic theories around cognitive barriers. But the way to think about it is this idea that, I made a decision here, I applied a way of thinking, I did it again here, successful again. I did it again here, context changed, but I'm applying that same mindset. Corporate control valves are all the different ways that companies can accelerate or decelerate innovation by what they do. So this is like metrics. It's who you promote, right? It's compensation systems. It's culture, right? Culture is a big one. And then there's accelerators. And accelerators are everything that you do to connect with the outside environment to make sure that your internal reality is consistent with external truths. So when you see all of these corporate executives coming to Georgia Tech for a seminar put on by Tim's group, that's good. That is an accelerator because you're interacting with people outside your company, and that's a real driver of the ability to thwart disruption. So I've given a lot of thought. I'm still in the middle of it. I am like swimming in data right now. I've got about 600 pages now of single-space transcripts that I'm through most of it, and I'm still digesting all this. But one of the things that really hit me, I was thinking, so it's not change, it's rapid change. So how do you deal with rapid change? And it's like it's unchange. So what do I mean by unchange? It's like in rapidly shifting sands, what can you grab onto that's solid? So I think about it this way, and this came through out of my interviews quite a bit. And it's around focus, values, and boundaries. So focus is, does everyone understand what the goal is? Values is a tough one because values means trust. Values means why. So I not only understand where we're going, I understand why. And I believe in it. I believe why we're doing it is important. And if you don't have that, it is so important because if you don't have that, it's all the things that people do when you're not looking. It's that little extra that hundreds of people put in because they understand the why and they believe in it. And boundaries. So boundaries are, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to tell you where you need to end up. And I'm going to create the boundaries that you can operate in. But how you do that, that's you. And that's where we talk about diversity and why diversity is so important. It's so important because working within those boundaries, if everyone thinks the same way, they come from the same background, they're not nearly going to be as effective. You want to pull that out. And that's what boundaries do. And the other component of boundaries is not just kind of on the side, but when do you need to end up? So I love this quote from Kennedy that we're going to, by the end of this decade, we're going to achieve the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. So he didn't know how that was going to happen. He didn't know. But everyone believed in it. It was very clear what the goal was, and they knew when they had to do it. And you know, most corporations, this is what most corporations would do. They would say, first, I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. And they would pat themselves on the back and walk off the stage. That has a completely different meaning than adding before this decade is out. Why? Because it gave everyone involved a license to innovate, right? If you've got all the time in the world, you're going to take your time. You're going to see what internal systems you can leverage. This forced people to innovate. Amazon, very similar. And so interviewed a lot of Amazon people. And one of the things that is so consistent, it didn't matter who I talked to, everyone knew this. Everyone knew the flywheel. And everyone could talk to me about it. And you know what? I never asked about it. I never ever asked about it. They told me, not the other way around. And it was all around decision. And it always confused me. It was like, I know you have these pizza teams, you have all these small teams, and you're a huge company, they're all working on different projects. How do you manage that? How do you coordinate that? And they have this philosophy around customer experience. So if I'm trying to make a trade-off between, you know, a higher profit or better customer experience, I ground myself in this, and it's going to be better customer experience, because that leads to more traffic, which attracts more sellers, which creates better selection, which then drives customer experience. And as it continues to grow and I continue to learn, it drives my cost structure down, which increases the customer experience. So all of that took a long time to generate, and now we see what's happening. Here's the other one. Go on offense. And so after World War II, the US military interrogated all of the German commanders. And all of that information is available. If you're a researcher like me, you find these things. And so Hermann Balck he led the Panzer troops, and what he's famous for is he had to go against the Soviet 5th Brigade, where he was outnumbered 7-1 in tanks, 11-1 in infantry, and he wiped them out in a matter of days. And so our US generals were saying, well, how did you do that? I don't understand how that happened. And he said, you have to attack. He said, people make the mistake of thinking that there's more casualties going on attack than trying to defend. And what he said, he used you might have heard blitzkrieg, right? The principle of blitzkrieg was essentially short, quick attacks. You're always on offense. Short, quick attacks and novelty. So you think about it, and it's where a lot of corporations right now, they're kind of on roller skates, right? They're getting hit with so many things. You saw that one chart with all of those logistics companies. They're like, oh my God, I'm getting hit from all sides. How do you defend against that? You don't. You do not. You attack. You have to go on offense. That's how you combat that, not playing defense. The other one I like, this also comes from a guy named John Boyd, who was military strategist, and he talks about building snowmobiles. And I interviewed the head of the Army's Strategic Military Command. They still talk about this concept of snowmobiles. And John Boyd, he used this analogy of, imagine you're on the ski slope, but and you have access to a few things. He talks about water skis, a big toy bulldozer, a bike, and different things. And with the idea being that all these things you can put together and create a snowmobile. And the idea for companies is, how do you build a snowmobile? How do you take the assets that you have and reconfigure them to create new value? And companies do this all the time. Shoot, UPS, we did it years ago. We started out as a messenger service where we had a few phones and calls would come in, and then we had runners, bikes, and motorcycles. This was back in Seattle, early 1900s. And we had this great messenger service. And then everyone had phones. And so you didn't need the messenger service anymore. So we had to figure out what we were going to do with these motorcycles. We had some trucks, we had some bikes. So when we said, okay, we're going to start delivering packages for local department stores. That's how UPS, our package delivery, really got started. Now going into the future, and this is something that I've been involved with intimately, is all of those companies, how do you get a feel for what they're doing, and how do you know which things to pay attention to and which things not to pay attention to? And so, as you can see, this is a sample of companies that we've invested in. You see e-commerce marketplaces, you see autonomous, you see same-day delivery companies, crowdsourced delivery, right? That's a business model that's going to impact us. There's actually, I think, yeah. So Roadie is, you've heard of. It's an Atlanta company. So in drones and AI robotics. And then Fast Radius I highlighted because that's one that I've been focused on for the last several years around 3D printing. And the thing about 3D printing is the technology is getting better and better and better. The materials are getting better and better and better. The cost is going down. The quality is going up. When it was just about prototypes and models, it wasn't really interesting to us. When it became about when it came about mass customization and industrial goods, that became really interesting to us. And so you got to look at the tea leaves. So one of the tea leaves we saw was patent applications. And after the original 1980s patents wore out, there was a huge spike in activity. And we knew that, hey, this is getting real fast and we need to jump in. Lastly, make lives better. So in terms of what you're focusing on, you cannot focus internally. If all you're doing is focusing on how I'm going to become more profitable, how my company is going to sell more, you're missing the boat. It is solving for inefficient wealth, access, skill, or time. And you look at the companies that are succeeding today, they're hitting typically multiple ones of these. And again, it's about looking externally. So the way forward. So 4 key areas that I've touched on to challenge your status quo. And I say your. So look internally at your status quo. Beware of incrementalism. And understand that technology layer. Go on offense. You need to think like a startup, build snowmobiles, and hands-on experience is really important. So when we're investing in these companies, we're actually doing pilots with them. We're not learning by reading, we're learning by doing. Provide a license to innovate. And it's the most important thing that I tell companies if you want to succeed in this environment. You've got to have a strong, diverse workforce, and you've got to give them license to innovate. And then make lives better, which can't be underestimated enough. it can't be about you. It's got to be about the value you're providing. If you can't answer the why, if your people can't consistently answer the why about what you're doing, you're lost. So it's incredibly important. So that's it. I haven't left as much time for questions as I had hoped. I can take some questions now. I know we're almost at the end of the time. Also, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, ask me questions. But if you have any questions now, I'd be happy to answer them. Stunned silent. Yes, sir.
First off, thank you so much for taking the time out of your, I'm sure, very busy schedule to come out and share your insights.
Sure.
I've read Clayton Christensen's book. One of the key points that he highlighted in his book was most of the time, the reason why companies never see it coming is that they're focused in a completely different area and with completely different customers or customers they don't want. So they never really feel it because financially they don't feel it. But at that time, those companies are getting valuable data and they create a moat. So theoretically, if you follow that same framework, your disruptor might not necessarily come from logistics. They may come from a completely different business that has the cash forward to do experimentation. And then, like for example, Amazon. They have a cash forward for AWS, a whole series of other businesses, and more importantly, really important transactional data. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, reading that, how do you delineate? Because it would mean that you guys would have to go into areas that you know completely nothing about, and your advantage would be worthless. So how do you delineate about what to pay attention to and what not to?
First of all, I absolutely agree with you. So you were paying attention. Thank you for that. Yes, like I said, I mean, let's say FedEx. FedEx is a great company, fantastic company, great leadership. I'm not worried about FedEx because I know that if they invest $1 in logistics, they have to make $1 in logistics. There's a lot of, whether it's Amazon or other digital upstarts, Alibaba, 70% of the small package shipments in China today go through Alibaba's Sanyao network, their logistics arm. They don't have the assets, but they control the relationships. I'm very worried about that. And actually, to your point, I don't think what we do becomes irrelevant. I think what we do could become commoditized. I think that in order for companies like UPS, you have to continue to evolve your offering. And so you think about 3D printing, why 3D printing is so important to us. We have to move upstream in the supply chain to stay relevant. So whether that's moving up into doing some light or on-demand manufacturing, or moving up and taking a greater role in retail and procurement, things, to your point, that we don't know anything about. That's going to be really important. And so it's going to require companies like UPS and other industrial companies to evolve. And the way we're going to evolve is by working with companies that are in those industries and learning. And whether it's through acquisitions, partnerships, joint ventures, there's all different ways that companies, industrial companies, can bring in new information, new talent, new ways of thinking, and continually update their business model. And that's going to be critical. That's a great question. Yes?
I have a question. Yesterday during the supply chain day, there was a company called Convoy. It's like an Uber for tracking.
Yeah.
And they have told me they have changed from together, and now they have 225, and they're just like the platform connecting the suppliers with the demand.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm moving from Atlanta to Chicago with an FT traders, I'm going to find new people to send it for.
Yeah.
So instead, like you said, we have to start thinking as a startup. Why not just like trying to find a solution or the best alliance? Because they're already there. So why just wasting time of starting thinking while they're already there? So we can find an alliance, partnership, whatever.
So I'm not sure I understand your question. So you were talking about Convoy and their business model, which is kind of an Uber for transportation, right?
Yeah.
It's a, and so some of the companies that we've invested in, Deliv and Roadie, are Uber for transportation. And so we're learning about those spaces. And when you think about, I talked about Signal, Alibaba. That's essentially what they are too, right? They're kind of a digital broker of the transportation relationship. And so what's important for UPS is that you don't want to be disintermediated from the customer, because then you become irrelevant. And so that's why, to this gentleman's point, the things that I'm more concerned about are being disintermediated from our customers and becoming less relevant. That's what, and that's what we're trying to adapt to. And there's companies like Convoy that are filling a very important niche, right? That's been created. Uber Freight's growing as well, and so there's others. And so, so yeah, that's top of mind for UPS and other companies. I'm not worried about companies like that building networks like we have. But I am worried about them disintermediating us from our customer. And in order to keep that from happening, we need to evolve our value. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, do you know what's in the packages, like for major orders?
No.
Do you get that information?
No, typically not. So there are customers where we are doing the fulfillment for that. We know what's in the package. Typically, we don't.
Okay, because my question would be, I mean, theoretically, with the data that you know of just volume of movements, I mean, you could fill up almost Facebook-like role where you can find demand and do the matching. So does that happen?
Yeah. So no, it doesn't. But believe me, we have been talking about that for a long, long time. Here's the situation we run into. It's around privacy. So we are stewards of our customers' information. And that information allows us to run our global operation. If they lose trust in us as stewards of that information, everything that we do implodes. So it's number one. Now, the argument is that we're not talking about identifying an individual company and individual products. We're talking about aggregated data, right? And that's the argument that people like me and others have put forward. So far, the data security has won out, but you're right. We do have a lot of information. There's a lot of opportunity there that has not been leveraged to this point. But it's a good insight. Okay.
If we have no further questions, please join me in thanking Alan for presenting. Thank you, Alan.